It's Thursday, and you know what that means. It's time to dive fin too deep with myself and Neal Driscoll. Today, the Dolphins at the NFL Combine met with a absolute stud tight end. We'll talk about that as well as another player they've confirmed to have met with. Also, Tua Tagovailoa in his new contract. League sources are saying to Armando Salguero that this new contract is going to easily pass 50 plus million a year. We'll talk about that, dive into that. Also, Neal has found a interesting nugget about Liam Eichenberg's financial situation and playing off the discussion I had with Richmond yesterday as to whether he is going to be given the shot to be the starting right guard if Hunt walks. Man, things are starting to add up. We'll talk about all that and so much more. Smash the like button, subscribe if you're new. Let's get into this.
Touchdown! Got it! You have got to be kidding me. Jalen Waddle has a Dolphin touchdown. And he will score! Field down the near side, man open. Touchdown! The run from Tua Tagovailoa. Touchdown! He's going deep. He's got it for a touchdown again. Touchdown!
Beautiful day to be a Dolphin fan. Let's go!
You're listening to Fin Too Deep.
Tua back to throw. Blitz coming. They get to him. No, he takes off running. And he's in. Touchdown, Miami.
With the sixth pick in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Miami Dolphins select Jalen Waddle.
Giving you unfiltered, informed, and controversial takes on the Miami Dolphins and the NFL Draft. Here's Reason and Neal.
What is good, Fin Nation? What's good? It's your boy Reason. We are back here for another one. We got a jam-packed show as the NFL Combine is starting out, and a kid I told all y'all about in the top 50 to watch at the Combine, Braden Fisk. He is absolutely balling out. So is Byron Murphy. I mean, he went from a top 15 pick to he's knocking on the door at number 10 right now for a top 10 pick. Man, the Combine draft season is upon us, Neal, and we're getting to watch some of these freaks out here, and we're also getting to hear about some players that the Dolphins have interviewed so far, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But Neal, how you feeling? As I know a fellow draft aficionado like me, this is one of your favorite times of the year, right? Right before free agency too.
Yeah, man, I love it. I love it, and I really love this year's draft class, man, and I'm excited about it. And it's also the time of year where we're seeing that robust free agent market start to already dry up with the franchise tags, right? Like L'Jarius Sneed with the Chiefs, T. Higgins with the Bengals. It sounds like Jacksonville's going to slap it on Josh Allen. Carolina's going to slap it on Brian Burns. The Ravens are ready to do it for Justin Matabuki. Miami's ready to do it for Christian Wilkins. You know, I just named practically my top 5 free agent list. So, you know, we see this every year where it looks so good up front, and it looks like it's going to be this, you know,
stack class,
groundbreaking class,
yeah.
and it's just and it dries up. And honestly, I'm not too worried about that anyway, because we don't have a lot of money to go hit the open market with as it is. So, but no, man, it's the best time of the year. These kids, I mean, these athletes just continue to get better and better. I mean, Chop Robinson at 254 pounds running a 4.4940 is just absolutely insane. Pulling for the guy as a husband of a Penn State alum. Always love to see those Nittany Lions get in there. And man, yeah. I mean, Braden Fisk made himself a lot of money. He actually reminds me a lot of our boy, Zach Sealer. I see a lot of, with a way more higher athletic profile, but I see him being that kind of lunch pail type of player like a Seiler.
Yeah, he's a man. He's a stud. But you mentioned something there, a name little preview of I'm going to be dropping my top 30 free agent list tomorrow. Free agent targets for the Miami Dolphins. And a little interesting thing about there, you mentioned a guy who's on my list, a little sneak preview. Because they're paying T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd would be a very interesting slot option for the Miami Dolphins. I mean, it's a guy who's fine with playing a role behind two big guys. You go look in previous years, he has produced from the slot. Now he's a 4-5 guy. He's not going to blaze you from the slot, but he can block. He can do a lot of things. I mean, interesting thing how, they're going to lose a really good wide receiver 3 option that could be and should be a target for the Miami Dolphins if they're looking at adding a slot option in free agency. It'll be cheap.
Yeah, if you follow my draft, my Twitter thing, you know who my draft crush is now. I've made it really clear, and it goes against what the Dolphins have as a team need. But I'm all about finding another weapon for this offense, whether it's a receiver, a tight end. I know you and I are lockstep with this. If Brock Bowers gets out of the top 10, right?
Oh yeah, you move up, man.
What I like, and I've seen people like reluctant to give up next year's second-round pick. They can have that. And they can have that in my left pinky finger if we can get Brock Bowers. Okay, like I could care less what it takes to get him. He's my number 3 overall player. I think he's a complete game changer. But the guy that I think could flirt with him at 21 that could be there is Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU, who I view as a George Pickens type player with way less headaches. I think George Pickens is phenomenal. He's one of my favorite players to watch. But we've seen a lot of kind of those sideline antics with him, right? Like kicking stuff, yelling at quarterbacks. But, getting another option for this passing game and this offense overall, I think is something that's got to be high on the docket.
Yeah, I mean, and we're going to talk about the wide receiver a little bit today. But I know people are here's the thing. You can already see how it's setting up. People are just getting infatuated on Jackson Powers Johnson.
Yep, yes.
When we were talking before we went live, Zach Frazier at 55 would be a phenomenal steal. I don't think he'll be there at 55, but or even you said, a guy who we feel has been overanalyzed a little bit because he's not a great wrestler like Zach Frazier was, and he doesn't have the athletic traits that Powers Johnson and Frazier do. And yeah, I'm not talking about Graham Barton because me and the man next to me kind of view Barton more as a left guard, left. I don't buy those whole. Sure, he could be a center, but I don't buy that right now as compared to these guys. And Cedric Van Pran. You said before we went live you'd be fine with that at 55. A guy who's being overanalyzed, had a little bit of a down year, but was pretty much the consensus number 1. But my whole point is people are getting so locked in. Yes, we need O-line. Yes, we need O-line, but there's going to be options like a Christian Haynes in the second round, or those centers we just talked about. One of those might be there in the second round. There's going to be options. One of those tackles it's a pretty decent tackle class. It's probably going to be a tackle there at 55. Now, I don't think it's going to be. I think Marius Mims and those guys will be already gone. But anyways, my whole point is people are getting so locked in on O-line at 21 without realizing, man, we got so many holes and needs right now that, if a Brock Bowers it falls to you, which he's not falling to 21, but if he falls to you and you move up a little bit, you can't get mad at that. Another name, we've seen him mock to us. I don't think he'll fall to us, but if Alaiatu Latu falls to us, you know what I mean? That's a move where, given our injuries right now, and me and you have discussed moving off Chubb after this year, and then Phillips's money will kick in 2 years. That's getting out ahead of the curve with a really talented edge player, which is something we don't really do a lot, get out ahead of the curve. So, I mean, there's so many options and there's so many ways to go in this draft at 21 and 55. And this is one of those things, Neal, where when you don't have a 3rd and a 4th round pick, you have to be open to all these options. You can't be, you shouldn't be tunnel vision as it is going into the draft. But when you don't have a 3rd and 4th round pick, you shouldn't be tunnel vision anyways. You need to take, when you have these many holes and you have this few picks in the first 2 days, you need to take as close to or as guaranteed as a day 1 contributor as you can get, and you need to get as many of them as you can.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I think we're at that part of the draft where everyone's getting stuck on certain players, right? and Jackson Powers Johnson's that hot name right now. I think if the way it shakes out, and if we get him, I'll be ecstatic. I think he's a great player, and he plugs and plays at center for the next decade.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also think the Dolphins have to be prepared to move back and get more draft compensation.
agree.
I think that's my primary goal in this draft.
That's a conversation I've had, Neal, because we're at 21. And if you look at 21 is kind of that, I've seen people out here. I think I did the count. I have either 18 or 19 first round grades right now. And I've seen some people out here saying they only have 14 first round grades. And, you at 21, you get into that cusp of, am I at a first round grade or am I getting into a high second round pick right now? And that's where it comes in, trading back. And what can you do there, Neal? I've talked about this before. If a Bo Nix is sitting on the board and next year's draft class is so bad, you could get someone to move up and get a little extra because it's for a quarterback. That's where that I totally agree with you. If my first round grades are out the door, because I don't know how many they have, but let's say they have 19 or 20 and they're all out the door for them. Yeah, I would be way more open to trading back at 21 now. That why take a glorified second round pick at 21 when you can try and bait a team to come up and get a quarterback? Because there could very well be 5 or 6 quarterbacks off the board in the first round because of how weak next year's class is. Like we're talking Tyrod Taylor class week next year. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's going to be Shedeur Sanders and a bunch of other people. and I pulled up my big board. I have 21 first round grades.
So
based off of what I have on here, and I
we're
agree,
right on
man.
the same.
So if you move back and you can coop a top 10 pick of the second round pick, and get yourself another day 2 pick, I think that's the best scenario for the Dolphins, because I do say, my scenario that I keep throwing out is the Carolina Panthers. They're hungry for a receiver. They have a lot of teams in front of them that are going to draft receivers. I think, if the board falls the way it could be in Buffalo, Kansas City. I've heard the Ravens are a team that could be sniffing the receivers with losing Beckham and Rashad Bateman going on the last year of his deal. So you trade with Carolina, you get pick 33, which is a great pick to get because it's also going to have a lot of attention on the start of day 2, because if one of those quarterback needy teams needs a quarterback, and Bo Nix, Michael Penix, and another guy that I want to throw out there that I think is going to rise here is Spencer Rattler.
You're starting to see that, eh? You're starting to see the reports that scouts believe he's better than Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. You're starting to see the agents working, right?
Well, the traits are great, man.
They are. It's up here with him. It's always been up here.
If he had a brain, he'd be great. So I think you're going to be in prime position where you could trade back a little bit and recoup even more picks, do kind of a trade down again. But say you don't do that and you're sitting there right at 33, like you got to trust your evaluations. Interior offensive line is one of the 3 deepest positions in this entire draft, right?
Yeah.
You can get a Christian Haynes there at 33, or Zach Frazier, or if someone else is better, then you can say, you know what? I can get a Cedric Van Pran or Christian Mahogany at 55. So you've got to have that type of flexibility and that type of mindset where you do trust your evaluators, because, who knows? Maybe at 33,
55.
I'm saying if you trade
back. Okay.
Maybe you can get, I don't even know who it is, a safety to pair with Javon Holland, right? Tyler Nubin from Minnesota screams out to me as a guy. Interceptions, amazing ball skills. But you can't get locked in a player, because what happens, and I've done this, right? I want player X so bad. It was me. The draft that I always remember was Brady Quinn. And when we took Ted Ginn Jr., I wanted Brady Quinn so bad. And when we didn't get him, it didn't matter if Ted Ginn became Randy Moss, I still would have been frustrated with that pick, because I became so in love with one player that it kind of ruined the draft for me. Where
I remember that. Oh my God.
Oh, dude, it was bad. And
can I explain to you? Sorry, I got to cut you off. I have to, and then you can continue. I will never forget this day. Because remember back then, it was on a Saturday. It wasn't this Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
It was the best format. That was the best format. All day, Saturday and Sunday.
Bro, I remember I had to work that day.
Ooh.
And I was pissed, bro. I was already pissed. And I remember I was doing a landscaping job. And I remember being on the front yard of this house. This guy had banana pale yellow garage doors. All right, this old man. And I remember, because you remember back then, you know, you had to update the ESPN site. It wasn't an app. You had to go to the site. Apps weren't out yet like that. It was you had to go to the site and refresh, and then the list would refresh, right? Because you couldn't stream from your phone back then, right? Bro, when that came through, I literally, like as loud, like on an empty street. Who the Ted, and obviously I knew who he was because the national championship and stuff.
Right.
But who the Ted Ginn Jr. And bro, I remember getting home and dude, my girlfriend at the time, oh man, we got pizza after I was done work. I remember me and her got into an argument because I was so just bitter from that we passed on Brady Quinn, bro. I remember being so freaking mad. And then when I watched we didn't just get Ted Ginn Jr., we got the Ginn family. Oh my God, I almost threw myself off the roof of my house, bro. I remember. Oh my God, I remember that day.
I have a similar story because I was with I was dating a girl at the time that we had just moved in together, and when that happened, I had a Dante Culpepper Miami Dolphins bobblehead, right? So right off the bust and frustration of a Dante Culpepper, then we skip on Brady Quinn. I threw that bad boy off a wall and shattered it, and we had set dinner plans that night for like our favorite restaurant, right? And she ended up staying at her mom's because she was so mad at me for throwing shit off the wall. And it was one of those things for me too, man. And ironically, Ted Ginn actually probably had a better career.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everyone went to die in Cleveland at that time. Let's be honest, too.
Yeah.
I mean, Brady Quinn, if you would have got coaching somewhere else, or I'm not even saying Miami, but somewhere else, who knows what would have happened. Paulie King says, I remember when we drafted Deion Jordan, I was screaming Lane Johnson. That's what I was screaming. Lane.
Yep.
Oh, and don't even get me started about John Beck, because I remember trying to convince myself he's mature because he went on the remember BYU, he had to go on the what do they call it? The when he had to go
Mormon mission, right?
Yeah, he went on the mission or whatever, and I was like, he's mature. And then the guy comes out and he literally has identical numbers to Josh Rosen over their first 4 career games. Like, oh my God.
Buffalo fumble snap over his head for a touchdown was the first thing I remember about John Beck. But,
dude, I remember being so excited when I saw Henny's arm for the first time too.
Oh, me too.
Oh, and then who knew that arm would overthrow Ted Ginn Jr., and I didn't even know that was possible.
Bro, I've been drunk on the aqua and orange Kool-Aid for 36 years. You know that I had a John Beck jersey. I had a Chad Henne jersey. I have a Trent Green Dolphins jersey.
Oh my God.
Yeah, like
I thought he would be on, bro. I was like, if we can get to Trent Green, was in St. Louis before Kurt took him, and he's not. Oh, but the concussions, bro. Oh my God. Same thing when we got Cameron Jordan. Remember when we got Cameron Jordan, how good he was in Cleveland, but the concussions just were like way too much for him by the time we got him, bro. And he's just a shell of his former self.
Yeah, man. When that season when we had Trent Green, I was on the NFL Network commercial. And that was the game where Dante Culpepper, as a Raider, tore us up and ran 4 touchdowns, and he was in the end zone pointing knee. My season tickets at the time was in section 126, row 4. So I was right in the end zone, 4 rows back, and you can see in the commercial, and it's just me flipping the bird to Dante Culpepper. NASCAR drunk, sunburnt, pissed off that I flew in for ball, because at that time, before I had kids, I flew to every Dolphins game from Baltimore. I went every home game 8 times a year. I flew from Baltimore to South Beach. My dad had a house in South Beach at the time, so that saved me a couple bucks. But man, that was the 1-15 season. That was the season where the only game we won was when we beat Greg Camarillo, had the angle, and we missed them, and we won. But man. There's a lot of those war stories. There's a
lot of pain.
There's restaurants around here that literally I was banned from on football Sundays because of what the shenanigans that had went down, win, lose, or draw. Like, just the glory days, man. 3 kids.
The glory days. Oh, I love it. Oh, guys, do us a favor, smash the like button, subscribe if you're new. Let's start off. Let's get into this. Now let's start off with Tua Tagovailoa. and his contract. Now this has been a topic of discussion, and there's just a blurb from Armando Salguero's article that I want to go over here. It came out yesterday, just before I went live, so I actually didn't see it before I went live yesterday. And it went out in the day about 3 hours before I went live, and I actually didn't see it. And so I want to cover this with you. This excerpt right here. The Miami Dolphins are all in on quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. How far? It will eventually be clear before the start of the 2024 season when the quarterback's agents in the club agree on the contract extension they're currently negotiating. General Manager Chris Greer said Wednesday he's been talking to Tagovailoa's agents since the offseason began and will meet with them in person during the combine to continue discussions on a deal. Remember, I've reported I just had a massive combine update for Patreon and for channel members under the community tab. Become a channel member, become a Patreon, go check it out. A whole bunch of info I got. Jerome Baker, news on what's gone on with Robert Hunt, continued confirmation of what I've been reporting to you guys for weeks. They want this deal done by the beginning of free agency, if not a few days into it. I have Connor Williams info in the update. It's a massive combine update. Go check it out. But this is the part where we're going to talk about right here, Neal. It says right here, and I quote, a league source said the complex deal is nowhere near completion, but when it gets done, it will, quote unquote, easily put Tagovailoa in the 50+ per year club that only 4 other NFL players, all quarterbacks, belong to. So right in front of your eyes, there you go, Armando Salguero. He's got a league source telling him that we're talking not 50 million, but 50+ million per year. Now, let's talk about this. And the reason why we're going to talk about this is yesterday everyone was flipping their lid over that spot track projection that came out yesterday, right? And I said, hey, listen, let's wait for the real.
So light. That seems so light to me.
Yeah. And I said, let's wait for the real numbers, though, right? Like, let's not have, but because I mean, let's be honest, that 2 extension, my friend, that was a freaking deal. All right. When you actually broke down the numbers, having 105 million at signing given to him over a 4-year deal, and then only 60 million of guaranteed money to be spread out over 4 years, that gives you a lot of flexibility to play with. And give it to me, because it was only about 41 million guaranteed per year when you look at the real money, and that it was falling about 2 million short from where it was 43 or 41
Yeah, I think
million.
it's like a little bit short of Daniel Jones, right?
No. It was about 2 million short of Burrow and Herbert in terms of per year guarantee money.
Okay.
Yeah. When you did the math and stuff. So it was like a good deal in that sense. What are your thoughts on this, that it's going to range from 50+ million? Because people are going to see that. They're going to see it in the title. They're going to see it mentioned there. Again, Neal, it's our job to tell these people that's all fine and dandy, but what's the real money?
Right. Yeah. Well, look, man, my opinion on this isn't going to change. The hardest thing to do in professional sports is to find a franchise NFL quarterback. The hardest thing. I don't care if it's hockey. I don't care if it's basketball. I don't care if it's baseball. I don't care if it's football, tennis, whatever it is. The hardest thing to do in professional sports is to find an upper echelon franchise quarterback that can get you to a Super Bowl. I think that's the hardest thing to do in sports. Mm-hmm. And sure, I think Tua at the end of the season left a little bit to be desired. I'll say that. There's no shadow of a doubt that he is the best quarterback that we've had on this roster since Dan Marino retired. If anybody knows how hard it is to find a franchise quarterback, there's not a fan base that knows it better than us. We had one of the greatest to ever do it. And then we've had every jabroni in the world we've rolled out, whether it's been Dante Culpepper, Trent Green, John Beck, Chad Henne, Gus Farratt, Pat White. The list goes on and on and on. And I won't include Chad Pennington in there. I think Chad Pennington was a good quarterback, but we knew that was a stopgap. Yeah, and look, Ryan Tannehill never lived up to the top 10 billing, but I would say that he was an adequate quarterback when he was here, but he never.
No love for Joey Harrington or us trying to find that greasy magic again?
Sage Rosenfels, I forgot about him.
No.
But what I'm saying is, man, like, we have a guy that's a bona fide top 10 starter in this league, and at times he could be top 5, and at times he's probably 10, but like that is hard to find. So The reality is that Tua's deal is going to be expensive because of the timing of it. The NFL cap just got bludgeoned with an additional $30 million in cap space, and it's going to continue to grow like that. Every quarterback deal going forward is going to, I put in air quotes, reset the market, because that is such an overrated term in sports. It's even worse than the word elite, man. Every time the cap is going to go up every year. We know that going forward. Deals are going to get bigger. The evolution of the NFL is only getting bigger. The TV deals are getting bigger. That tells me
Gambling.
every single time that when Caleb Williams is extending his rookie deal, that it's probably going to be $80 million a year, right? That is just the economics of football. And I'm not, look, I'm not an economics major. This is just economics.
No, but I've been trying to tell Neal, I'm just adding to Neal, and you can continue. They said we had just saw the largest salary cap increase of $30 million we've ever seen. And they've even stated they're doing this and they're trying to smooth the number over the next couple of years. What does this tell us, Neal? We've talked about this. You could see $60 million increase over the next 2 years alone.
Right. And we probably will see something in that ballpark. And that's where, that's where you have to be, you have to be savvy as the NFL front office to understand where the cap is heading, right? Because look, we are fans. I wanted us to trade for Jonathan Taylor last year, right? Could you imagine the cap burden we would be in right now if we had that, contract on the books? I want the Dolphins to win. I'll put every player on this roster. I'm not the one that actually has to stroke the check and make the economics of it work, right?
Yeah.
But I don't have a Bugatti in my driveway, right? I don't have a Ferrari. I want those, but I just, that's not what I can afford at this time. So for me, it's one of those things that this has to get done, and it's getting it done now and saving $10 to $15 million in cap space is paramount to where the Miami Dolphins need to do to retain some of the talent they have that's going to hit the market. Tua deserves this deal. And I'm not even faulting the Dolphins for being a little bit late on extending them, because there were circumstances with Tua with the concussions and injuries that you had to see it through. This is just, unfortunately, a deal of this size. You look, as soon as the ink dries, the next quarterback that signs,
Dak,
it's going to be bigger.
Game Richmond brought it up. Richmond, actually, you got to get it done before Dak hits that $60 million reset.
Right. And here's the other thing, because we can all talk about whether he deserves what amount or not. If you don't sign Tua Tagovailoa and he says, you know what, I don't want to play on the 5th-year option, this season with promise goes right down the toilet, right? If he holds out or does anything of that merit, and he wouldn't, because that's not Tua. What is the alternative? Do you want Michael Penix? Do you want Bo Nix? Do you want J.J. McCarthy? Do you want 35-year-old Kirk Cousins coming off of a bad Achilles? Do you want Ryan Tannehill, Jacoby Brissett? Those are the guys that are available, man. There is nothing to get that is even in the ballpark of Tua Tagovailoa. And, I think sometimes, man, it's you instead of looking at other people's yards and looking how green their grass is, water yours, man. Appreciate what you have here, because when he's gone, if he did go, in a hypothetical, there is no way that you have an opportunity to improve your quarterback position this year. Zero. Justin Fields, not a chance. Justin Fields is 19th to 20th best quarterback in this league. Tua is the 10th at worst. That is the dynamic here. You can't, without Tua, there's no point to having Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle on this team right now. There's just not. This chemistry, that what we built, you got to see it through at this point. I'm happy as hell for Tua Tagovailoa to get that type of money. And, I'm just not the kind of guy that's going to come tell people how to spend their money, man. Look, I go to Dunkin' Donuts every day of my life, and I pay $4 for an iced coffee that if I make it at home costs me 20 cents, right? Look, that's the life we live in, man. And unfortunately, if you like great things, you got to pay great prices, man. And I think Tua Tagovailoa has earned this. He's the franchise quarterback here. And honestly, I hope that this eliminates that portion of Dolphins Twitter that wants to complain and act like he's not the guy, because once that contract is signed, you could take your opinion, shove it, turn it sideways, and shove it somewhere, because at the end of the day, the Dolphins view him as the quarterback, and I'm very excited about this for Tua. I think it couldn't happen for a better guy. This guy keeps continuing to get better and better, and when he shows that type of improvement again, in a year, this contract will be a steal.
Okay, so that spot track deal, right? 4 years, $220 million, average is $55 million, right? But but again, people are going to look at that 55. But it's about the guaranteed money, right?
Right.
And again,
That's all that matters.
There's 165 guaranteed, and again, that's about 41.25 million. Whereas, you look at Herbert, right? Herbert, he has about 43.6 million guaranteed. So again, that $2 million gap, right? 41 to 43.5 million guaranteed. So it's again not 55, but I mean, and that projection lines up with what Armando reported that he's heard from a league source with easily 50 million. And so you take that as a 55 million range. And then, you build a deal with that. Here's what is going to happen. Okay, so 165 of the 220. Let's go off that. 165 of the 220 is guaranteed. So that extra 55 million, that's going to be pure playtime incentives, performance escalators. Like, he just led the league in passing. There's going to be escalators in there. If you lead the league in passing again, you'll hit it. Pro Bowl, because he was just named the first people tend to seem to forget. That's why I question, how long have these people been Dolphin fans for? This is our first Pro Bowl quarterback since 1995.
Right.
I mean, we're literally talking 30 years almost here, right? Like 29 years, I mean, that matters. That'll be put into an escalator, right? And so, listen, and again, if you let's go off that. If I give you 165 guaranteed on 220 over 4 years, and I'm giving 105 of that up front to you right away, first of all, shout out to Stephen Ross. That's why you got graded an A by the team report card, because not many owners can cut that big check right away. So then look at 60 million spread out over 4 years. That's, how much play that gives you. And then what are they going to do? Right. See, what people don't realize is, okay, we get that 15 million right now, right? The 10 to 15 million right now, if you extend them, right, Neal?
Right.
Next year, what happens? First year of the contract, they know he's going to be there for the following year 2 of the contract. So what are they going to do in year 1? Restructure that baby, and they're going to create more cap again and push it back. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to keep this window open, and they're going to keep and it's look at what hasn't Mahomes restructured every single year in his deal.
Yeah, and that's where, honestly, that's where, I'll be honest. I think I know the NFL salary cap, especially the Miami Dolphins salary cap, better than 99% of the people that I see on Twitter. I think that, but I know it 10% to the level of a Brandon Shore, a Chris Greer in the Miami Dolphins front office. There are nuances, ways to restructure deals, new money deals, void years. There's all these different things that you can do to manipulate your salary cap. So that's where it's I feel like there's such an emphasis on saying what the Dolphins can't do in certain salary cap situations. And it's fun to, project and predict how they can spend money and players you can add, because that's ultimately what we try to do, right? Is to fill needs in with players that we like, in whether it's the draft or free agency. But the reality of it is nobody here is equipped to really understand the true nuances of the NFL salary cap to the level of the people that get paid to do that as their primary job. So
Brandon Shore.
Yeah, Brandon Shore. That's it's one of those things for me that it's good to have a basic understanding of how it works. And if you're a nerd and you want to spend more time on it, like I have, to really understand it, find outs, look at every player and see, what's the best scenario with them. Spend time. It takes time to do it. But we have no idea the nuances, the things they're discussing behind closed doors right now, because those are the conversations right now. It's release, restructure, new money. That's it, right? Well,
yeah, and if you add that 5th-year option, because someone asked it, hey, what does it turn into with that 5th-year option? What does that count with the extension? That turns it basically into a 5-year, $243 million deal, which is about $48.6 million a year. Now, the guaranteed money would be 188 divided by 5. So it'd be about, the guaranteed money over 5 years would then average down from 41.5 million to about 37.6 million. So if you add in that 5th year, it even brings down the guaranteed money spread out over 5 years, and it brings him down to less than $50 million a year if you add in that 5th year option as part of the extension. So if you add in that 5th year option as part of the extension, it actually makes it look like even more of a good deal, right? Because
Yeah,
now he drops
it's a
from
no-brainer,
55.
man.
Now he drops from 55 million in average over the 4 years. He drops to 48.6, and he drops from about 41.5 million guaranteed over 4 years to about 37.6 over 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, look, dude, it's going to work out. Like that's the thing is the numbers will work. Getting this deal done now, I think, is what's most important to me. Like, there's no time. There's sure it's a big money deal. There's complexities to it, but you also right now still have 13 days before the league year starts. Get it done. Like, let's eliminate this burden. Let's stop any doubt, uncertainty. I'm committing to you, Tua. You're the franchise quarterback. You're everything we want. And you know what? Good, because that is a huge hurdle as a franchise to overcome. Not just drafting a quarterback and develop him into your franchise quarterback, but to get that first contract out of the way, man, I think it's a huge deal. Because the Dolphins, if you think about this, and I know they re-signed Ryan Tannehill, right? But this to me is a little bit different than this. We have a guy that we really typically view right now as a franchise quarterback. Like, this is kind of uncharted water for the Miami Dolphins in a long time. Like, I was laughing the other day because when Dan Marino's last season he played, his cap hit was $7 million, yet Robert Hunt's going to get 15 to 17 on the open market. You know what I mean? Think about that. The best passer in the game at that time got $7 million, and a guard that we all like, but's never had a trip to the Pro Bowl, right? That's never been among, I guess the top at his position is going to get what is double quarterback money. It's insane to see, and that's why wrapping things up with Tua now, knowing what next year's draft class is, there is no alternative. There's none.
All right, let's keep it moving because you mentioned you noticed something real interesting here. Smash that like button, subscribe for new guys. You noticed something interesting here when you were doing your little daily foray on over the cap. Let's bring it up to people here.
Yeah.
We'll talk about escalators. When we look at Liam Eichenberg on this list, he's right here for all of you guys looking right there. I've highlighted his numbers. He clearly hit playtime escalators because his cap number has jumped to $4.163 million. And now if you cut him pre-June 1st, you save about 3.36 if you cut him. Listen, I talked with Richmond Webb about this. I brought it up. And it was, again, go to the Patreon if you're Patreon, or go to the community tab if you're a member, and go check out the info I had on Robert Hunt. Something I pitched to Richmond was, could they believe that Liam Eichenberg is the answer at right guard? Because he talked about how comfortable he was at right guard last year. He had a few games there at right guard last year. Is that another reason why they're not letting Robert Hunt leverage them for big money, because they believe they got Liam Eichenberg? But now you see this money, and the first thing you said to me, Neal, without even knowing I had that conversation, was that's starter money in this offense right now. What? And I said I'd cut him and save the $3.3 million now.
I would too. And reason I just found it, and as of last week, because I keep my own chart, so I found it.
Yeah.
As of last week, his base hit was 1.7 million.
Wow.
And with bonus was 2.5 all in with Liam Eichenberg, and they could have saved $1.7 million by releasing him. His cap almost doubled in this scenario, which is starter money. And I'm trying to find the reason why this happened, but there must have been some kind of escalator for play time or starting time that he hit, because his cap jumped significantly. And when you look at our line, because here's the reality, right? We've seen that Chris Greer's open to bringing back Isaiah Wynn, as a potential player on the offensive line.
Yeah.
Eichenberg's going to make Wynn's probably at $3 million per season.
Not even. He's probably about just under $2 million.
Right. So it's like, this to me is very eye-opening, because I did not have Liam Eichenberg as a potential cap casualty. I think there's two players I think the Dolphins like a lot more than us, and that's Jerome Baker and Liam Eichenberg. I have all that there's the two players they like. But if that type of savings, man, I think there could be, they either view him as a starter or he can be released. That's where it is for me. I think they view him as a starter, and I think that they view the offensive line as needing 2 players right now instead of 3, where
3.
I
Yeah.
view them needing 3.
We need depth too. Jesus.
And they need depth. So
Because
it's one
Robert
of
Jones is even an RFA, eh?
yeah, he's 880 to keep him, 880 grand to keep him, I think. And honestly, man, I think that the Dolphins might disappoint a lot of us where I think they'll get one starter in the draft, and that starter, unfortunately for a lot of us, is going to be upset because I think Robert Hunt is gone as soon as he hits free agency. So we are probably going to look at a line where it's definitely Armstead and Jackson as the bookends, with Eichenberg probably at right guard. They get another starter, and it might be Isaiah Wynn with Ken Lamb and Robert Jones and Keon Smith probably as your backups. And I think, unfortunately, it might not be this massive upgrade. Now, the one caveat I'll say to that is that you can also be savvy in free agency with offensive guards. And there's a few that I like: Damian Lewis, John Simpson on the left side. And man, Kevin Zeitler was awesome in Baltimore.
And he's cheap. He's a stopgap. He's a cheap option. Bro, why you got to start spoiling my free agency list over here? Huh?
You have Zeitler on it?
I had all 3 of those guys on it.
Oh, nice. No,
I got a couple more. But three of those names are on it.
Those guys they're not bank breakers, man.
No.
And that's another thing. And I see it in the chat, and I know that you like. I don't want him because in the last 2 years he gave up the most pressures in a 2-year period in NFL history. Laken Tomlinson's a guy that maybe because of the familiarity,
he's a 1-year stopgap for cheap money.
And he's already making, I don't even know what it is, I think $10 million from the Jets and dead cap.
He's like 32, though. That's why I say 1 year.
Yeah, it would be a 1 year, but that could be an option. But there's definitely options to build the offensive line. And look, I don't think Mike McDaniel's philosophy really values the offensive line to the level that we do.
Which is nuts.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that we got to just come to terms with as Dolphins fans.
What have I been saying for years? Chris Greer treats the offensive line like a running back room.
Yeah,
literally. Look.
I will say this. It'll be funny, though, if we get to pick 21 and they do get a Powers Johnson or a Troy Fatnu, because then it shows the opposite of what I just said, which would be a good commitment to that offensive line. Because I think both those players are honestly, in 2 years, better players than Robert Hunt, and that's Powers Johnson and Troy Fatnu.
Yeah. Troy Fatnu could be the best interior guy from this class overall, and Jackson Powers Johnson could be one of the best centers in the NFL in 2 years.
Agreed.
For sure. Same thing what we say with Brock Bowers. He could be the best tight end in the league in 2 years, because people are crapping on Bowers' blocking ability, but I think he's willing, and I think he's able, and I think he has the functional strength, and I think he was just never asked to in Georgia. It was, you're a great athlete, go make plays. We got guys like Darnell Washington who can do that for us, but man, I was gonna say something.
In reason, in 2025 on one of these podcasts, we'll be saying that Brock Bowers is the best tight end in football. No doubt.
Yeah, I agree.
No doubt.
Now, with Laken Tomlinson, he makes sense just because that's a 1 year stopgap. But this interior, I don't get. Like, you saw, especially if you know your quarterback, Tua is one of those guys where the interior is what needs to be tight for him, not the tackles. He's got the pocket presence and the maneuverability where he can deal with pressure off the edge. For him, it's about allowing him to do his thing in the pocket, is about making sure that interior is a tightly ran ship. And a great point Richmond and I talked about, and after the show yesterday, and something I had heard, do you really think this team is going to pay an interior player, whether it's center or guard, more than what they pay Austin Jackson or Teron Armstead right now? They're not going to. You just do not pay guards more than tackles. So what Jackson's annual average is $12.5 million. You really think they're going to go out here and give Robert Hunt $15 million? It's not going to happen.
No,
that's going to be Teron Armstead type of money.
Yeah, if they're let Robert Hunt walk for the price that we've heard, which is around $15 million, I am 100% confident that they're not going to spend big on interior offensive linemen. They probably say, instead of signing Hunt, we can get 2 of the guys we like for that same cost. This is their philosophy. And then I just want to address in the chat, I see someone said that Bowers over Laporta. Come on, I don't see it. Oh, then you got to watch more Brock Bowers, and we both love Sam Laporta.
Yeah, I was a Laporta stan. He was on my man crush list last year.
Yeah, Bowers is what we use the most. There's 2 terms that are so overrated in sports: elite and generational. But Bowers is both of them to me.
Bowers is a top 5 player in this draft.
By far.
And you could literally think about this. Think about a tight end / slot player. you could build an offense around him. That's how talented he is, man. Like, he's not don't take this kid lightly, man. Trust me. All right, let's keep it rolling here. Something you talked about earlier was Brian Thomas. He's one of, I've got 4 first-round grades for receivers.
Yeah.
I've got Brian Thomas, Rome Odunze, Neighbors, and Malik Neighbors, and obviously Marvin Harrison Jr.
Insane group.
Insane group.
Insane.
I mean, we're not even touching the Xavier Worthies and the Troy Franklins. And I'm a big fan of Lad McConkey, and I think
Xavier
Roman
Leggett,
Xavier Leggett is a
Mitchell,
Debo Samuel guy.
Ricky Purcell, Roman Wilson. I mean, it's Tez Walker.
And
it's crazy.
There's a couple names in there that I think McDaniel could fall in love with in the second round. But anyways,
Malachi Corley is a guy that I love.
Another one too. A lot of Dolphin analysts seem to be falling in love with him. Okay, so do you think I've talked about this before, but I want to talk about this because I've seen you've been throwing up the Brian Thomas propaganda. And I think Brian Thomas is gonna be a fucking stud. Do you think this could be a sneaky pick at 21 or 55 if they don't get something they like in free agency? And the reason why I'm asking you this is 2 things. One, and I'll show them here for you so you can see the visual. One, this is what Chris Greer had to say. He was asked, you have a talented roster that seems on the precipice of winning playoff games and have been building towards this moment. Do you think it's fair for me to suggest, or are you on the same page that with that first round pick, probably thinking more safer contributor this year for sure, as opposed to higher ceiling, little more risk project? And this is what he said. Greer said, I think at the end of the day, we pick at 21. You'll always take the best player. If it's someone that, even if it's a position that, I don't want to speculate in a position, but if it's a position people would think we're stacked at, you never know. Like last year, everyone said our outside linebacker group was really deep. Then things happened. And then the receivers, Waddle went down. Tyreek got banged up. So in this league, the way injuries happen, you need depth everywhere. You can have the safe pick, but if there's a guy that you truly believe is a supremely talented player and loves football and will work to reach that ceiling, then it's up to us to spend the time and invest in them to find out, and you make that decision you feel is best for the roster, not just short term, but long term as well. And then this little, how do I word this? This little excerpt from ESPN. Listen to what Marcel Louis-Jacques says about the wide receiver group.
South Florida is synonymous with relaxation and celebration.
Hey. Yeah.
But for the Miami Dolphins, this offseason is all business. With the Dolphins well over the salary cap, General Manager Chris Greer can't afford to relax.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we have good players here. We'll try and keep as many of the players here that we can.
He's going down. He fumbled. Christian Wilkins has the football.
Defensive tackle Christian Wilkins, a multiple-year team captain who set a career high with 9 sacks last season, is an unrestricted free agent. He's also a homegrown talent who's done everything the organization asked of him over the past 5 years. It won't be cheap, but keeping Wilkins in aqua and white is arguably the Dolphins' most important offseason task.
The man down on the Miami side.
But that's Connor Williams, the center.
But their starting offensive line from a season ago missed a combined 32 games to injury in 2023, and 3 of them are free agents this offseason. Spending a first-round pick on a lineman is a realistic option.
To it, back to throw. Deep downfield.
Every time I see a Dolphin analyst say Troy Fautanu, I take credit for that because of our show.
And of course, there's Tua, the NFL's leading passer last season and a candidate for a mammoth extension this summer.
So the goal is to have him here long-term playing at a high level.
Tua said he expects a deal to get done.
I don't feel any pressure at all. I have full trust in what I'm capable of doing for our organization.
A long-term contract would lower his salary hit this year considerably.
Tua deep down the right side. He's got a wide open receiver. It's Tyreek at the 10. He's got it. Touchdown.
Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle aren't going anywhere.
Touchdown, Miami. It's Waddle.
Tua to Tyreek again, and it never gets old.
But no other Dolphins player had more than 370 receiving yards this season. With a deep group of pass catchers available in both the draft and free agency,
John Coleman.
It's an area Miami must address before taking the field again in September.
Did you notice that Thomas Jr. was the first person
Yeah,
they showed?
that he showed. But did you also notice he said it's a position they must address this offseason? So I say and show all that to ask you, is this a sneaky position they could be drafting at if the right guy falls at 21 or 55? Because I think it is.
It actually makes too much sense, and here is why. Because what we view the Dolphins' needs are as, offensive line, inside linebacker, nose tackle. Sure, they're going to have holes, they're going to have team needs, but I said this, I think last week when we did this. I no longer care about how many resources we throw at the offense side of the ball because your defense can be great and you're not going to beat Pat Mahomes. You're not going to stop him. You can have the all-pro defense out there and Mahomes is still going to get his. The only way to beat Patrick Mahomes is to outscore him. And the way you do that, the Dolphins desperately need a number 3 weapon. We've talked about Brock Bowers on the show. We're talking about Brian Thomas Jr. and other receivers. I don't care how they attack it, but it's Braxton Berrios, huge disappointment. Cedric Wilson, huge disappointment. Chase Claypool, huge disappointment. Durham Smythe, reliable number 2 tight end, isn't going to do anything for you in the passing game. Julian Hill, he's a number 3 tight end in this league at best. Who else? Is it Braylon Sanders? We've seen that guy out there, done that. It's not going to be the guy. When you have such a strength on the outside with Waddle and Hill, you are setting up success to this young guy. If you bring in and I'm saying Brian Thomas Jr. because that's the guy that I want. First of all, he's a different player than what you have. He's fast as hell too, but he's 6'4", 205 pounds. He wins on the contested catch. He utilizes his length really well. He is a savvy route runner who accelerates out of breaks extremely well and creates separation. If he's the number 3 weapon in this offense against nickel corners and safeties and linebackers, with his red zone presence, without the pressure of being a bona fide one, a lot of these young guys come with such high expectations.
Yeah.
You come here, you just do your job.
And you didn't even mention the flexibility he allows you. We've already seen the damage they can do in the slot. It allows you to rotate Waddle and Tyreek into the slot way more, and it answers your slot concern.
Yeah, and look, I see why not Easy. I like Easy, and he could be the number 4 receiver here. But look, at the end of the day, you had 2 opportunities to make his impact, and I hope he does develop. But how many wild cards, how many chances or community chest cards are we going to take to hope that they pan out? We're doing it on the offensive line, receiver, linebacker. Yeah. Eventually, you got to go and take the bull by the horns and make something that strength. To do that to that wide receiver core, you think that Tyreek and Waddle give people nightmares right now? And you're about to pay Tua $50 million. Why not?
He's not going to, but would you run to the podium if Odunze was on the board too?
Look, man, I think
there's no way he drops a. But
I think him, Neighbors, and Marvin Harrison all go in the first 6 picks.
Yeah, they're great. They're studly.
Rome Odunze actually reminds me a little bit of Mike Evans, and Neighbors. And I think Neighbors is the most underrated.
LSU's just pumping them out, Jesus Christ.
Well, yeah, and that's Neighbors is one of the most underrated players in the draft because he lives in the shadow of Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah.
And I think Marvin Harrison's great. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think the gap is that big. I think the gap between Brian Thomas at 4 and the number 5 receiver is bigger than any of the other gaps between the top 4 wide receivers. So, and I said Brian Thomas to me, it has the vibes of being this year's Justin Jefferson. The guy that falls down the draft board because everyone else is, the top guys and yet you got this guy that falls in your lap. Now, the thing about it is, as much as I'm starting to fall in love with this, when I watch more tape of Brian Thomas, I ask myself, how the hell will that guy
get there? But yeah, I don't think he will too.
You look at the draft, though, 4 quarterbacks are going in the top 20.
Yeah.
You know it. You know 5 offensive tackles are going in the top 20.
Yeah.
Right? We know that at least 2 pass rushers with Verse and Dallas Turner, I think Chop Robinson or Latu, either or both can go. Yeah. Byron Murphy's going top 15.
Yeah, he's going top 15.
Right?
Yeah.
One of the corners, Terry Arnold is going to go top 15 as a corner. Somebody, whether it's Bowers, whether it's
going to slip,
Howard Johnson, whether it's Brian Thomas, one of those guys that we could say are fin too deep, crush list type of guys is going to fall to where we are. And the thing I want to see most is that if one of those guys is there and it's pick 15, go get your guy.
Yeah, get aggressive.
Go get me an elite talent or trade back and acquire picks. That's what I really want. I don't want them to stand pat at that pick and make a pedestrian type of pick. I want them to either go up and make a bold move for a player that just will be a game changer here, or, play it safe, move back and get another day 2 pick. That's my 2 avenues that I want to take. Personally, go get me that sexy weapon. I spent the whole beginning of the offseason telling me that Borden is sexy, built in the trenches. Maybe that's just not our style.
You can get it at 55, though. You can get it at 50. Well, look at it. If we've already solved that they're going to bring back Isaiah Wynn and Isaiah Wynn from the cheap, and Eichenberg at right guard, really all you need to do is you can take that weapon at 21 and target a center at 55. Literally.
And let it roll.
And there you go. But
because they're not going to one thing they're not going to do, and we've talked about this, they're not going to spend multiple picks on offensive line. It's just not going to happen.
The first 2 picks are not both going to be offensive line. We know
Austin Jackson for that exact reason.
Yeah,
they prioritized Austin Jackson over Robert Hunt, and the reason is probably
because he's willing to be played. Yeah,
younger, he was cheaper. They knew Robert Hunt because the negotiations weren't materializing during the season, and they said, you know what? Between free agency and the draft, it's an unbelievable interior offensive line class. We love Robert Hunt. It's just not going to work out for us.
And they've continued to try and hammer out a deal, and he's just not coming down, right? So
he have fun being a Washington Commander and being last in the NFC East. And
hopefully the market isn't as robust as he wants. Shout out to Fake Spike 94 with the $100 donation, because yesterday,
like that name too. Like that name.
Yesterday was the 1,000th episode for me on Finside the NFL, and he said, "Congratulations on your 1,000th episode yesterday. We appreciate you in our house. Keep up the excellent work." Thank you, Fake Spike 94. He's been one of my day ones, been supporting this channel since it started in March 2020. So Fake Spike, he's one of the day one homies. Appreciate. I hope you and the wife and your son are doing absolutely fantastic, my friend. Hammer donates $5. Said, "Neal, how are you doing, brother?" And I think he might be alluding to the loss you recently went to. So Hammer wants to know how you're doing.
Good man. My aunt passed away earlier in the week. She had the toughest life of anyone I've ever met. Had to bury both of her sons in awful fashion, shock deaths. Her husband died very prematurely, but a trooper to the end, man. And my Aunt Ellen, I'll definitely miss her. But good news is she's finally at peace.
Man, sorry to hear that, bro.
I
know I texted.
Dude, I'm getting old, man. I got more grays on the sides, and unfortunately, a lot of my, my aunts and uncles, and when you get old, man, you have to deal with like large amounts of loss, and it's tough. But show, like, I mean it in a good way. The show goes on, man.
Yeah. Now, you remember a couple weeks ago, I showed my way too early 3-round mock drafts, and I took Troy Fautanu in both of them with PFN. Yeah. And then in one of them, I took Fautanu and I took Jatavian Sanders. Well, Jatavian Sanders, he spoke today, and David Furones spoke with him. Check this clip out.
It was great meeting Mike McDaniel. Like, you know how you see him on TV, he's a real cool guy, laid back guy, and he's like that in person. So it was a great experience meeting him and talking to them.
What do you think of their system and the tight ends role in that system? What do you think of their system and the tight ends role in that system?
I would love to be in there. I know what I would have success. They would set me up for success. So I'd love to be a Miami Dolphin.
Yeah, I would love that
too. Bro, this is the red zone. You talked about with Brian Thomas. If Brian Thomas and Bowers are off the board at 21, this is a red zone threat. I don't know if he'll be there at 55, bro.
30,
because
trade back and get him in the top of the round.
Yeah, sure. Like because we saw where Laporta went. This is a freak athlete. I've told y'all it's Bowers, Jatavian Sanders, and it's not as far off as people want to say it. And then it's Ben Sinote, and he leads the third tier of guys, man, because those two are in two tiers of their own. Man, would I be excited if we got Jatavian Sanders somehow with that second round draft pick, bro. Oh, what an absolute stud he would be.
And reason, some of the things I've heard about him is that he carries himself really well. He's a very composed man. In Texas, he had a lot of weapons around him. And the end of the season, when they needed the tough catch, the guy that Quinn Ewers was trusting at that last final drive when they were almost making that comeback was Jatavian Sanders. And he
Yeah.
got banged up on a play. He missed one play, came back in, took a massive hit. I mean, I would say this.
He's one of the best contested catchers in the draft, let alone at tight end.
Yeah, he's a guy that you're not going to take him at 21. That's too high. But if you do trade back, he moves to the top of my list for the Miami Dolphins. I think because look, the tight end position in the NFL, man,
And he's going to be a better blocker than Bowers too, I think, eh?
Yeah,
At the next level
it's
for
not
sure.
great, man. The overall position's not great. This draft class isn't that great. Bowers is amazing, and Jadavian Sanders is a guy that in the right system can be as productive as any of them. And I do like Sanders a lot. It's interesting to see because I look at people that have because we have a formal meeting with them. Other teams that do, I know the Ravens have formal meetings. The last thing they need is a tight end. But I like watching what the top teams in football do because when they're meeting with prospects and they operate on the best player available model more so than let's draft for need. I think it's really interesting that a team like the Ravens, who already has Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely and Charlie Kohler, are still meeting with this type of guy because that's how you find players that just are studs because you might not need them, but then you get to know them and you're like, you know what, we're going to bring this guy in anyway. And the next thing you know, I mean, I think he's a guy that I put out something earlier with players on my radar. He's definitely at the top of my list, and I'm a big fan of Jatavian Sanders.
Yeah, he'd be, 6'4", 240. He would be an absolute freaking stud. I mean, you look at, you just look at his ability in the red zone, the way he, for a guy that size, the way he moves and his overall body control, and man, just again, he's so fantastic at contested catches. He offers you a ton after the catch, and he has that streak in him where he can get nasty if he needs to in blocking. So yeah, I'm a fan of Jatavian Sanders, man.
And reason you to look at the last 4 teams that were left in the NFL in the playoffs, right? The Chiefs had Kelsey, the Ravens have Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, the 49ers had George Kittle, and the Detroit Lions had Sam Laporta. That's 4 of the 5 best tight ends in football, bar none, right there. That shows you that there's a value to that position, and that's one of the things that
if we had a third or fourth, I'd be flirting with Ben Sinote.
Yeah, I like him. I love this kid, Jared Wiley from TCU. I know.
I'm interested to see how he's going to test because 6'7" at that size, I got to see this.
Yeah, and then there's obviously there's a big Florida.
Cade Stover, there's
Jaheim Bell's going to get a lot of love. There's Dallin Holker from Colorado State.
He's quietly. I think that kid quietly with the right fit, that kid could be something.
But I think that Bowers and Sanders, because you look at tight ends, and Sam Laporta is the outlier to this, but usually tight ends struggle in their rookie year. It's one of the hardest positions to learn. Yeah, I think Bowers and Jadavian Sanders are the only 2 tight ends in this whole draft class that are day one impact players.
Yeah. Another player we met with, because we're talking about the defensive line earlier, we met with Leonard Floyd, and this is what he had to say.
Yeah, it'll be great. I mean, at the end of the day, it'll be great to play in my own city, but if that don't come true, I'm ready to play for wherever. Just go out there and work.
And have you had talks with him? Yeah. How did those go? What was your impression?
They went great. Just knowing that the Dolphins was talking to me was a great experience. It was good. It was a good experience, though.
Now, as you know, the DLs were the defensive linemen today. They were getting it done. And this was his Raz from today. It wasn't too great at all. I'm gonna tell you this much: it was no Braden Fisk from FSU. Or it was no Byron Murphy.
You know what I'll say about Leonard Taylor, man, because I've watched him a lot.
Yeah, he's like a number 6 or number 7 in this class on the defensive tackle, I think.
Yeah, he kind of, there's players that play really well on Saturdays, and they're not going to go to the combine and test well. And Leonard Taylor, to me, is a guy that is going to he might even fall all the way till the end of round 2, maybe into round 3.
Yeah.
But he's a guy that when you get him on your football team and he's making plays initially as a rookie, don't be shocked because he's a talented dude. And him and Cam Kitchens, both the local products there, are guys that are firmly on my radar. They also have a center, Matt Lee, that I like a lot at the end of the draft. Like I will say that like Leonard Taylor to me, he reminds me of a little bit lighter version of Leonard Williams from who was on the Giants and went to the Seahawks. I like his versatility on the defensive line. I think he has to mature a little bit. But yeah, I think he's a guy that could dare. But yeah, I think there's a few guys for Miami. Kitchen's a safety I like a lot. Yeah, I see Alf in there saying Matt Lee, who I just mentioned. Yeah, Matt Lee's a guy, and if he's a round 5 prospect, like don't sleep on him. I could view him as a guy that, he might not be a day 1 starter, but when we talk about accumulating offensive line depth, that's a home run. If you get a guy in the 5th round that you can plug on your roster.
You think he's going to be there? I've got him I've got him in my top 5. I got, my top 5 is basically Jackson, JPJ, Frazier, Van Pran, because I think Barton's a left guard. I got Matthew Lee, and I got Andrew Rame from Oklahoma rounding out my top 5.
Yeah, they're right around the side. But those centers tend to fall, man. Sometimes, and I don't know. But yeah, man, and we didn't even mention James Williams, who I like a lot. I actually view him as a plush version of Mark Barron coming out of Alabama, a guy that can play the safety, move into the box, and play a little bit of linebacker. Yeah, I mean, look, dude, I pay attention to Miami football a lot, and I know there's people that know it better than me, man. But when it comes to college ball, I watch the Terps because that's where I went. I watch Penn State a lot because that's where my wife went, and then I watch the U just because when I was a Fairweather fan back in the Ed Reed days. Ed Reed's my favorite player never to play in a Dolphins uniform. Obviously, I think we all, when those old video games and you could have Reggie Wayne and Andre Johnson, we all burnt that original PlayStation game up, right?
Yeah. Finally here, I wanted to ask you this because we're talking about wide receiver 3 and everything like that. Barry Jackson put out an article, and he had an interesting excerpt out of his article. I'll read it to you here. I want to get your thoughts on it. It was talking about Braxton Berrios and how he kind of underperformed after he was off to a little bit of a hot start. And he said, and I quote, Berrios will become a free agent in 2 weeks, and he has perhaps the best chance of any of the backup veteran receivers of being asked to return because of his return skills. He ranked 13th in punt return average at 10.2. What are your thoughts on that? That, Barry basically saying, you look at the Cedric Wilsons and all these veteran guys who are moving on from even Chase Claypool, I guess you can throw into that hat. That Berrios is going to be the one that they try to bring back on the cheap.
Yeah, because I think it makes too much sense. I think it's going to be a less than $2 million a year
he
contract.
Does it?
Yeah, I think he's going to come back. And in my perfect little world, a wide receiving core that looks something like Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Brian Thomas Jr., Eric Uzakama, and Braxton Berrios would be a pretty damn good group of receivers, right? So I think because of what he offered in the punt game, I think he's a player that had a lot of chemistry with the rest of the team. Again, it's not going to be a huge contract, and I do think he did underperform a little bit, I guess, in terms of the production we were anticipating. But with that said, I still think that he did flash some ability to be a productive receiver here. I think he's one of the guys. I think Deshaun Elliott and Christian Wilkins are the 3 that come back. And I think the guy that could potentially be brought back, surprisingly, if he doesn't get a robust market, could be Raekwon Davis too.
Yeah. Final thoughts before we get out of here, Neal?
Yeah, I've been logging in, refreshing, expecting moves to drop, and the Dolphins, as usual, are slow playing it a little bit, get me antsy. But whether it's a new deal for Tyreek, Tua's extension, Jerome Baker extension, releases, something, we need to start seeing some of those moves because we do sit $29 million over the cap still. I mean, there's a lot of wood to chop before March 13th. So, they have time, but man, I'd love to know what they're working with. But they already know what they're working with in terms of cap. I guess they just don't need to let us know yet.
Yeah. Shout out to Daryl Wallace with the $4.99 donation. He said, God bless you guys. I have nothing but respect for you both. Appreciate you, sir. Here's the deal, guys. I'm intending to be back tomorrow with my top 30 free agent list. So I'll have all 22 on the top 10 players, and we'll go over the top 30 guys I like. And man, I extended it from 25 to 30 because we got so many needs heading in to free agency. Yeah, man. And, tampering is 11 days away. And because tomorrow's March 1st, right? And the window, the new year starts in 13 days at 4 p.m. Eastern time. So it's coming up fast. It's coming up quick. And we'll have you locked in and covered here on Finside the NFL for free agency, as well as the draft. And guess what? We're getting into the next couple of days of all the sexy positions at the combine.
And reason not to cut you off, but one thing we have to have here soon, right, is when is is it March 5th, the franchise tag due date?
It's the second or the third, isn't it?
So we have to have some type of verdict on Christian Wilkins here any day now.
Yeah.
And a lot of players.
Yeah, keep it locked in here. We'll have all the latest. Appreciate you guys. We had over 375 of you in the chat today. Smash the like button, subscribe if you're new. And as always, fins up all day, every day until Margaritaville sends a cease and desist our way. Take it easy, guys.